So let's talk about light probes. Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges we have here is when we're setting up the lighting in our scenes, is that we have to think about whether we're trying to influence the dynamic elements. So, for example, our player here, as as it moves through the screen, um, or whether or not we are trying to just create a beautiful and compelling and interesting kind of mood um, for our game. And so when we're making these choices, sometimes we end up with a situation like this where we end up with really nice lighting. We have some shadows being cast as we need to, right? So I'm moving in front of a dynamic light, and I've got another dynamic light which I'm using as a spotlight. I've got bake lights which are then rendering out the shadows and light that are happening with my static or non-moving things in the scene. Um, but my player is not being influenced, and in this case, it's not really critical because the game I'm creating for this prototype is in the first-person perspective. But for example, like if I wanted to make it so that this player was being influenced by the color of the lighting that's been baked into the scene, we can do that through the use of something called a light probe group. Now, the light probe group is quite easy for us to set up. It will allow us to choose critical places inside of our scene uh, to collect light information. And this will be the color, the intensity of a light at any given point. And then as we're moving our dynamic game objects through this space, we'll have Unity triangulate between these light probes that we're setting up, these critical spots, to be able to decide how to apply, this simulated lighting to this object moving dynamically in our space. To set this up, we can go into our hierarchy, and down in light, we can choose to create a light probe group. And I think I might have gizmos turned off still. I do. And when we create it, we end up with something that looks like this. So we have like the Unity icon here, which is the stuff in the middle, and then a cluster is like this interesting interconnected box of yellow spheres. These spheres are the actual light probes for us. These are the things that we're going to set up in our space to be able to collect lighting information. And so what we want to do is we want to put these things, we want to give ourselves good coverage first off, and then we want to make sure that we're putting these things in really critical places that any dynamic game object may move through. If we had a large scene here, there's no need for me to fill up like a scene that has maybe a lot of verticality. If my player or any other moving game object cannot access that space, right? We don't need to triangulate light from that. And actually, it might complicate things for us because we'll be getting light from places that don't really make a lot of sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of take this now and switch to my top view and start to distribute this around and just map things out. By default here, I don't have a lot of probes to work with, so I'm just going to take these things and kind of map out this space and then add some more as I need to. When I have the light probe group selected, I can move them as an entire unit, right? Just as I would any other Unity game object. Now, if I want to actually move these individual probes or make any changes to them, I need to select the Edit Light Probes option here under Light Probe Group, and you can see it illuminates these options for me down below. And one thing that I found really easy to do is if I set up a view here where I'm looking down in an isometric view, is that I can then click and drag over the things that I want. And then I can, move them as I'd like, just like that, as a group. And what I mean is, so it appears that I'm only dealing with, two of these, but I actually have this stack, right? Remember that I'm looking at like a stacked box. And so I often like to do that just as a way of kind of simplifying things for me. So for example, I know that I want to move these things over here. So I'll do that. Oops. I'll make that a little cleaner like that. And the exact placement right now is not super critical. I'm just going to make this so that I'm getting things lined up. But same deal, I'm just going to move this here forward like this. Again, anywhere that I think my my player or any other dynamic game object might move. Now, I could continue to move these things around. Let me go ahead and check how I'm doing on this axis, right? Here we go. So maybe I'll switch to an isometric view here and then just do the same thing, and I'll grab these and drag them down below just so that we have, yeah, I think because I've got this light source down here that's happening dynamically, I don't really need to worry about it, but if it was set up to be part of my light map, I might want to just make sure that I'm nice and close to this. My player can, in terms of like where they can be, can go, I don't know, they can go on top of this big crate, I believe, and then also jump. So maybe I'll make it so that the influence of this now is maybe from like right here, right? And again, I can move some of this stuff around if I want to, but this will give me a good place to start. Now, the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it so that I actually move some of these things around independently. So maybe I'll pull these over here. Looks good. But you see, as I'm doing this, I'm creating these interconnected points here. And as I start to move my game object through this, Unity will actually pick this up. So right here, this isn't like a great way of thinking about how the light is influencing this space, right? I can see that my yellow light here is going to have kind of a stronger influence than this blue. Let me add some more. So let me just keep continuing here before I get too deep into that. I think what I'll do is I'm going to take these and I'm going to duplicate them. I like to do this, and then I can move them just as a unit here, and then I'll duplicate them again. Right, I'm just going to go around and set up my perimeter. This may be unnecessary. I may decide that, lighting-wise, there's nothing critical happening back here, or I can simply, map this to this space here. And what I'm pointing to are these lights that I've created in this space, and maybe that is enough. But for me, I just like to kind of get things set up in a way that that I understand. So I'm going to duplicate that, right? And I'm just going to really flood this space with a lot of these. And you can see Unity is rebuilding this for me now. It's it's changing the way these light probes are interacting and showing us these vectors where we'll have this intersection. Great, I'm going to do it like this. And this is a place for me to start. I feel like I have this kind of broad area right here, which maybe isn't great. We'll see as we start to move through. It might give that yellow light a little too much influence, and if that was the case, what I might do is I might create another light here. I might duplicate. I tend to like duplicating these lights, these light probes, instead of adding them. Adding them tends to add them in another place. Here it keeps it kind of like I know where things are, which is nice. Okay, let's sort of drag this in place here. And once again, I'm dragging them as pairs, but at this point, if I'm designating things, for example, like maybe this point of light is really critical, I can delete some of these and just work with them as single units, right? There's no need for me necessarily to be that complicated. Here, because I'm, I am getting a little bit of some of this shadow happening from this light, not just this dynamic one here. I may decide that down below here, maybe I'll duplicate this one and I will pull it over here, right? So that way we can sample the lighting. Oops, I'm actually not where I thought I was. Pull that down here. Just bring this back over here. Great. Here I might make it so that it's testing just behind this box for me. It gives me like another critical place, just where this shadow might be cast a little bit. And so I could go around and just, build these things out like this and tend to make like a really nice complicated web of things. But then as I start to move through this space, oh, hold on. one critical step here. Let's do this. Lighting. I'm going to clear my baked data, generate my lighting. Right, and we can already see that my player here is being influenced by the light, right? So I have kind of a yellow cast here on the shadow, and then I have a blue cast here up top. Let me go ahead and turn these gizmos back on. The other thing we can see now that we've baked our lighting is the relationship. We can see how this is now being influenced by the position in space. And so as I move this, right, you can see what exactly is happening with that. And this is where we might start to make choices again based on what we're seeing, right? Like how much influence are we getting from one light versus another in this space? Turn these gizmos off. And I'll just kind of move through the space a little bit. Right, you can see that even with my baked lighting now, I'm able to use those calculations. See, here's an area I might put some more light probes. I'm getting a lot of red, even though I'm clearly like in this yellow area. I may delete some light probes just to try to, simplify that a little bit. I don't really need to be getting that much. But this is where we start to balance these things out, and we start to take a look at the way we're influencing things and decide, where can I start to make some changes, right? Do I need to have this coming from the corner here, for example? Oops. Coming from the corner here, or can I move it instead? Oh, always edit. Great. Or can I edit this and move it elsewhere, right? And remember, if you're not generating your light maps automatically, remember to move these things so that way you're able to get an updated view and you can see how things are changing. This is an area where I often like to turn auto-generate on just because I like to see the changes that I'm making as they're occurring, especially if I'm like simplifying. If I'm trying to say like, well, it's not super critical that I have like this point right back here. I could simply take this light probe group here, edit this one, maybe delete it. I could simplify things a little bit by just kind of saying this is the influence that I need right here, because I have nothing that my player can step on right here, so the light doesn't need to be calculated with such clarity from an overhead source like that. All right, so I can start to do this kind of thing as well. Okay, so those are light probes for us. They give us a great way of overcoming some of the challenges we face when we are designing the light in our game, to think about how to minimize our use of dynamic lighting and really make those feel really special and make those deeply connected to the things that have to move, have to cast shadows in real time, where we're focusing a player's eyes, and then how we can use these beautiful, more nuanced kinds of gradations of light and shadow in our space that make us feel like we're part of a real space, or a space that conveys a real sense of mood. And this still allows us a way of being able to feel more connected to that space as a dynamic object, instead of feeling as we're just kind of a disembodied thing in there. We're like our crates, we're like our lights, we're like our walls, we're physical objects in this space.